welcome to the Bible class of Jews for Jesus with Bob Mendelsohn.
Tonight we're reading Luke chapter 20. Yeshua is going to be entrapped, or at least they're going to try to trap him. Remember, chapter 19 ended with Yeshua teaching daily in the temple, and some people trying to destroy him, but they couldn't find anything to stop him because the people, I love this, were hanging on to every word that he said. That is dramatic. That's a great figure of speech, so that his words were like hooks for the people onto which they could hang. You know, if you're in a desperate place, you see these in the movies all the time. You see people falling out of windows, and Spider-Man or Superman or some Aquaman, I don't know. Somebody comes and saves the day. Some women, I suppose, Wonder Woman. Anyway, all these special heroes. And the way you get saved by these folks is to hang on to them. They say, I'm going to fly you out of here. I'm going to spider out of here, whatever. Hold on, and your job as the saved one is to hold on while they run, jump, and fly higher and further than the next guy. That's the image I get when Yeshua is speaking and people are hanging on to those words. It's a beautiful image to me of salvation from the nonsense of the world. You want to know nonsense in the world? There's a shutdown in the United States of non-essential government workers. So if you were running an agency like Kohl's or Woolworths or the Roosters or AMP, and you had 800,000 non-essential workers, what would you do with them? I'd suggest firing them. If they're not essential, why do you have them on board? In this day and age where money's tight and companies are always looking at bottom lines, you'd think you'd get rid of them. All right, so these 800,000 non-essential government American workers are on either furloughed or working and not getting paid. That's the word. That's the word that I've heard. I just wonder, from what kitty are they going to get paid? And if they are going to get paid, why don't we pay them now? And the whole thing to me is ridiculous. All right. So there are words, and every day, I mean, last night I put up on my Facebook, if you are an American citizen, so I'm glad you didn't weigh in, although the first three people who did weigh in were Aussies. If you are an American citizen, how would you stop the shutdown? How would you get people back to work? And I was gobsmacked by the noise that people threw out there. Build the wall. Excuse me. They're not going to build the wall before the government goes back to work. And on, but just the strident nature of people hostilely fighting one another. Somebody suggested that we should do something in a positive way. I thought it was a good comment. And a woman whom I thought was fairly intelligent jabbed instantly back at this person saying, you've just been listening to CNN and false news or fake news. And I think, why don't you just listen to what the person said? Anyway, it was just amazing to me how a word like, how would you fix the government situation, is immediately met with this splash, serious tsunami of hostility and strident rhetoric. Friends, in the words that Yeshua gave, he gave hope to people. That's how we need to live. That's how we need to be, so that people hang on to our words in a salvific way, so that people who are hostile to one another, well, Clive Palmer's terrible. No, I love Clive Palmer. He's going to make us great. Anyway, whatever you say, that people would hear wisdom, that people would hear kindness and godly intelligence. That's what we are supposed to be to one another and to the world out there. These people in verse number 48 of chapter 19, who couldn't find anything they might do, for all the people were hanging on to every word Yeshua said. That's pretty substantial. But let's live in such a way that people at least listen to our words if they don't hang on to every word. Chapter 20 begins on one of those days while he was teaching. So now we zoom in. The last verse gave the big picture, and now the camera zooms in on one of those days. There he is in the temple, and he's preaching the gospel, it says in our version, but the Greek is just simply evangelizing. Evangelizing. Does that word scare some of you? It does? What about it scares you? What is it, the idea of sharing what you believe with somebody that's scary? Or evangelizing means telling somebody something in a way that they didn't didn't invite you to tell them. In our case, there are repercussions. If you evangelize at work and they say, hey, if you want to get paid, stop that Holy Joe stuff. This word evangel is a great word. Evangelism, evangelizing. The first part, EU or EV, means good, and angel or angel is, of course, message. Good news or good message. If it's a good message, we ought to be sharing it. If it's not a good message, we ought not to be believing it. Think about it. If you believe it, which is smart because it's good news, then you ought to pass it on because it's good news not only for you, but for them. Anyway, Yeshua is there and he's evangelizing. Chief priests and scribes with the elders confronted him, ephistemi. They're right at his face, and they spoke, saying to him, hey, tell us, by what authority do you do these things? Or who's the one who gave you the authority? Hey, buddy, let me see your credentials. Let me see your CV. Let me see how you got in here. Because where's he teaching? In the temple. He's teaching in the place where scribes and elders and prominent people should be. And they realized, wait a minute, he's got this crowd. We don't have the crowd. Menachem down the other side of the barricade doesn't have a crowd. How did this Yeshua get it? Hey, who gave you this authority? Yeshua said, it's a good question. I'll give you a question, and then after you tell me that, then I'll answer. Sensible. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from men? What's he talking about? What's the baptism of John? Baptism sounds so Goisha, but it's not Goisha at all. It's very Jewish. Yep. So he wasn't saying, is the baptism of John from the church or the synagogue? Because it was a Jewish thing to baptize people. Was it from heaven, meaning did God ordain it, or from men, meaning was that a human initiation? They said, well, let's think about it. If we say from heaven, he'll say, why didn't you believe him? And if we say, yeah, the baptism of John was just a human activity, just from men, all the people will stone us to death, for they're convinced that John was a prophet. So they decided not to answer. They didn't know where it came from. That was their answer. We don't know. Yeshua said, well, then I won't tell you where I got my authority either. Now, some people would say that Yeshua is stalling, or that he is not sure from where his authority came, that he's just a human who's manipulating the crowds. What do you say? What's this answer? I won't tell you by what authority I do these things. In a way, then, he's calling people to a decision. I want to answer you. You're not giving me enough information so that I can answer you. Therefore, your conclusions are based on a lack of information rather than enough information. And you use the term common sense. They should have had common sense. If it were common, then everybody would have it. That's the problem. Common sense is not so common. Well, they knew that John the Baptizer was a prophet. They heralded him as that, which meant that they were in conflict with Herod, who had John killed, right? So there's this elite versus commoners, religious divide. And Yeshua is saying, which side are you on? And he's therefore calling people to a decision. Which team are you on? Are you barracking for the Kansas City Chiefs or the New England Patriots? Who are you? Heart and mind. You know, it's the heart. Often people say, I'm passionate about X, Y, or Z. And I appreciate that and applaud it. And we should follow our passion if it lines up realistically with our mind and our body, etc. I'm not going to become the opening batsman for the Australian cricket side when we play next, even if I'm passionate about it, because there's some reality like, oh, you've never held a cricket bat. Oh, like you're 67 years old. Oh, like, you know, etc. All these things. So there is heart and mind. If they denied John, which they did, but they don't want to publicly do it for fear of the people, that's the fear of man, then they will deny Yeshua eventually. And so he's calling them to decide. Whose team are you on? Good. Verse 9. Oh, so that's the entrapment, 1 through 8. The baptism of John. What was that? Verse 9, he told a parable, and you might have heard this parable before. A man planted a vineyard, rented it out to vine growers, went on a journey for a long time. At the harvest time, he sent a slave to the vine growers so they would give him some of the produce of the vineyard. Well, that's reasonable, right? You go and collect. It's your capital investment, so you want to get some product from that. He sent a slave. Who's the one who sent the slave? slave? Just a man. We don't know. He's not a king. He's not a royal guy like last week. He's just a guy. The vine growers beat the slave and sent him away empty-handed. So then the man proceeded to send another slave. They beat him also, treated him shamefully, atimazo, sent him away empty-handed. This sounds like a pattern. He proceeded to send a third, and this one also they wounded and cast out. The owner said, this isn't working. I mean, after a while you figure, this system is broken. Maybe I need to do something else. Reasonable? Sure. You might go with an army and say, who are these vine growers who are killing all my slaves? And how come I'm not being able to reap any benefits, at least interest, out of this whole thing? Mm-hmm. So the owner in verse 13 said, what should I do? I'll send my beloved son. Perhaps they'll respect him. Entrapments. They won't treat him the same way because he's respectable. A slave is a slave, all right. But a son of the owner, he's a macher. He's a big shot. When the vine growers saw him, they reasoned with one another. They dialogued together. That's the Greek word. They said, this is the heir. Let's kill him so that the inheritance will be ours. In other words, the master of the vine of the area, the vineyard, he's run out of servants and he's sending his son. If we get rid of him and the old man, he's not coming down. We've intimidated him. We'll just take it over. Manifest destiny. We'll dominate. Reasonable? Maybe in those days. I think of the Pirates of the Caribbean or Treasure Island or something. That's what it is. So they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. I don't know how the owner of the vineyard got wind or heard about what happened to each of the three slaves and now to his son, but he got wind of it. What then will the owner of the vineyard, by the way, the word is kurios or Lord, not nikurios. What will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and destroy those vine growers and will give the vineyard to others. It's a parable, so it's telling us one thing. What's the one thing it's telling us? Don't try to figure it out. Look at the next verse. Yep. He'll come and destroy. When they heard it, who's they? The people. He's teaching. It's there in the temple. Right? And he's just talking to the people who are there in his class. They said, forget about it. May it never be. This is a terrible thing. They said, we don't like this story. That's what they're saying. The story should end with the son came, the vine growers all said, oh my goodness, here's the guy. They respected him. That's how it should have ended. But it ends with the vineyard owner's son being killed. That's it? Well, it's not it, because it says that the owner's going to come and deal with those vine growers. That's the end of the story. The theme of the story is one thing. Let's see what it says. Yeshua looked at them and said, what then is this that is written? The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. That's a quote from the Older Testament, Psalm 118. Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces. On whomever it falls, it'll scatter him like dust. The story is about what? It's right there it's about everybody. It's really it's about everybody in how they deal with Yeshua. He's the son. The vine owner, the vineyard owner is God. The slaves are the people whom God has sent. Evangelists, prophets, John the Baptist, prophets, Moses, David, whoever. It's all this trail, not 1, 2, and 3, law, prophets, and writings, although I've heard that. But it is the testimony of the people of God who are faithful to God. And he has sent them to receive things from the vine grower. Now, who are the vine growers? People who are working in the field. So it could be the people who represent God to the people of God. It could the vineyard is Israel. So who are the vine growers? It's the guys who are running the show, who are operating as leaders in the field. It's the Pharisees, it's the scribes, it's the elders. It's the guys who are representing the vine owner at the time. The slaves, again, don't get particular about what each slave is and what each vine grower is. Don't worry about that. Get the big picture, which is those whom God sends to champion his cause can represent him well. However, some who say they own the field and don't might destroy them, including the son of the one who owns the field. Yeshua is saying, I'm the son, and the stone which you builders rejected has become the chief corner. I'm going to build something new, and I'm not going to do it in your field. He's saying you guys have made the wrong choice. You've killed the son. Now, has Yeshua died yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. But he's predicting his own death at the hands of those who represent the owner of the vineyard. That's pretty harsh. That's pretty defined. Everyone who falls on that stone, on Yeshua, is broken to pieces. And on whomever it hit, the stone falls, it'll scatter him like dust. So if you trip on Yeshua or if you let Yeshua fall on you, either way, if you reject him, the end for you is not so good. In fact, it's terrible. If you reject the Son whom the Father has sent, you will be desolate. Not a good idea. He's talking to the people. Can you see the scene where he's got a class like we have, and just on the side, someone standing in a hallway looking in is a Pharisee or an elder or a scribe, and he's overhearing it. Ouch, he's going to think. You understand that? He's going to wonder. So this is the vineyard workers, another entrapment, another way to get Yeshua off track. His explanation in verse 8 was that he wasn't going to answer. His explanation here is from the Bible, that the stone who was rejected is going to be the one on whom God is going to build a new community and set up a whole new leadership structure. Okay? Verse 19. The scribes and the chief priests, plural, tried to lay hands on him that very hour, and they feared the people. That's simply the word phobos, the simple fear of the laos of the people, the laity. For they understood that he spoke this parable against them. So the word got back to the leadership that this stone which they, the builders, rejected would be used by God for something better. And Yeshua is painting himself into the proverbial corner. Does that make sense? He's not trying to make himself filling an auditorium or a stadium with people who praise him. He's got people around him who are hanging on every word, and he's declaring the truth about those who are going to reject him. Flattery will get you nowhere. They understood he spoke this parable against them, verse 29, so they watched him and sent spies who pretended to be righteous in order that they might catch him in some statement, so they could deliver him to the rule and authority of the hegemon, the governor. You ever heard about these kinds of people who go into congregations and eavesdrop and set up spies who are trying to catch somebody, whether it's in Israel or it's in China? There are people who are I can imagine this happens in Sudan. I can imagine it happens in tribal Africa, where there are revival services, big Christian gatherings, messianic congregations in Israel, in particularly Haredi or at least Orthodox areas, and someone will infiltrate pretending to be a believer so that they can videotape or they can record information about somebody and then dob them in to the authorities later. Friends, it doesn't just happen there. It's happened in Sydney. There's a messianic gathering of people in the Russian Jewish-speaking world. They meet together in Redfern and have for a lot of years. And there have been people who've attended that meeting who spied and found other Russian Jews who were attending. As a result, the rabbi in charge of distribution of food and, if you will, validating people on Centerlink has withdrawn his certificate of kashrut. He's withdrawn from those people saying they're Christians, they're not Jews. And the people have lost the benefits that all other Russian Jews are getting on first arrival. It is a horrible thing how some will use this espionage to entrap people, and it's a shame. 1982, perhaps, somewhere in the early 80s, I was ministering in New York City in the Jews for Jesus office, and into the office came a young man who was wearing a baseball cap and looked like he'd be wearing a Lakers t-shirt or something, just a regular young guy, 23 years old, say, and who asked every kind of question there is about Jews and Messiah and this and that. And I'm really curious, he said, and I'd really like to know. And so I sat with him for probably an hour, maybe 45 minutes, I don't remember, right there in the office. And it was fantastic. And I got his name and address, or at least name and phone number, I suspect, and then set up an appointment to meet him, I think the next week on the same day. And very soon I discovered that he was no young guy. I mean, he was a young guy, but he wasn't just an inquiring Jew. He was an anti-missionary in rabbinical school, pretending to be someone he wasn't, to trap us into disclosing. And all I disclosed was who Jesus was. I mean, I'm not hiding that. So he didn't learn anything from us. But I called him on the carpet when I saw him at a messianic congregation 7 years later in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a good 2.5 hours west of New York City. And he was in there as if everything were fine. And he's a liar. I called him out on that and said to the Messianic leader of that congregation, why are you letting this guy who's now become a rabbi, why are you letting him in your place? You've got to keep the people away from him because he's going to look for the weakest among you. And I called the shepherds to shepherd the flock, and that was a good time. But these people who spy as if they're going to find anything are really looking for the weak and looking for those who aren't so committed. If you're ever in charge of a gathering, a home group, a fellowship group, a congregation, an organization, a ministry, guard the flock among whom God has made you an overseer. The purpose of these fellows who were sent as spies was to catch Yeshua in some statement. Obviously, a misstatement. What kind of statement would they be hunting? Against Torah, or against the temple, right? Or against the authority. And you see that, by the way, throughout the book of the Acts of the Apostles. They're always trying to catch Paul or somebody in a misstatement against Torah, etc. So now they question him, verse 21, saying, Teacher, we know. When they say teacher, this is called simply flattery. Excuse me, sir, Mr. Christ? No, we know that you speak, that's not his last name. We know that you speak and teach correctly, and you're not partial to anyone. This, friends, is horrible flattery. Actually, all flattery is horrible. It's lousy. We know that you speak and teach correctly, calling him rabbi, calling him teacher, and you're not partial to any, meaning you are authentic. You teach the way of God in truth. There's no hypocrisy in you. They are buttering him up to fry him in a pan. Is it lawful for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? What does that have to do with whether he's telling the truth of God or whether he speaks and teaches correctly? Not a thing. So it's just greasing, trying to catch him off guard. And dear brothers, dear sisters, flattery will get you nowhere. Flattery is evil, whether you do it or you hear it. Oh, I just love the way you sing when you're on the pulpit. Just love the way you pray in public. Oh, I just love that shirt you are wearing. You are so wonderful. You're my favorite. You're the best. You know, I go to Bible class and all these people, but your comments are always the best comments. As soon as you hear anything about you that's praise, just smile, say thank you if you need to, but don't trust that person for nothing. Nothing. You can't. Now, if somebody says, you did very well, cool, that's good. You can trust that person. But if they say, you're the best, you're the most, you're the everything, unless it's your new wife and you're in this adoration moment, that's okay. But if it's anyone else besides your spouse, don't trust them. That's how it works. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? He detected their trickery, their subtlety, their adroitness, really in a bad sense, the panorgia at the word. And he said to them, well, bring me a coin, a denarius. Whose likeness and inscription does it have? They said, Caesar's. He said, well, okay, give to Caesar what belongs, and give to God the things that are God's. They were unable to catch him in a saying in the presence of the people. Again, that fear of man is on these foolhardy spies, and being amazed, thaumazo, at his answer, they became silent. What did Yeshua add to the conversation that they weren't ready for? It was all about money and government. He brought God in, that's right. He added into the mix something that goes beyond their limited question. You want to know whether we should pay taxes. Of course you should pay taxes. He's already done that with Peter and the drachma. He's already said that to Zacchaeus probably in last week's episode. But in this week's episode, he says, you should render to God what belongs to God, and you're not living godly. I mean, that's what he's saying. They wanted him to say, don't give Caesar anything because they're the bad guys in the story. The Romans are occupying our territory. They're collecting taxes from us which are undue. They're way beyond propriety. They wanted him to be anti-government. Build a wall. They wanted him to be anything but a proper Roman citizen. He took it beyond whatever they wanted to say, you guys are messing with the wrong guy. You should render to God what belongs to God. He's not just talking about money. He's talking about your heart, talking about your faith. Yeshua is always doing that. You want to trap me? I'm going to raise the stakes. You want to paint me into that corner in an XY plane? Look out, here's Z, and we're going into a 3 space. Verse 27, there came to him some of the Sadducees, and they questioned him, saying, Teacher, Moses wrote, and they quote the Bible to him. If a brother dies, having a wife, he's childless, his brother should marry the wife and raise up children to his brother. What kind of marriage do we call that? Levirate. That's not Levitical. Levirate. 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 Okay? Yeah, this is common in many cultures, certainly in the Jewish culture. Now, there were 7 brothers, and the first took a wife, died childless, second, third married her in the same way, all 7 died. I mean, obviously this is an exaggerated story. This woman is the Black Widow. She kills every husband and all 7 brothers. I think if you had a 5th son, and this woman, I think I'd tell son number 5, leave her alone. She's bad for the family. Anyway, the third married her, same way. All 7 died, leaving no children. I mean, they just, boom. It's a trail to the funeral parlor. Finally, the woman died. In the resurrection, therefore, which one's wife will she be? For all 7 had her. So this is the 4th entrapment. The Sadducees try to entrap him in finding out what? What are they trying to hear? It's clued in that beginning in verse 27. So they're trying to get Yeshua to say there is a resurrection, which would show him to be anti-Sadducee. If he's anti-Sadducee, what else is he anti-temple? Because if he's anti-Sadducee, the Sadducees ran the temple under Rome. So they're trying to trap him. This is the end of his public career, pretty much. And everybody's trying to paint him into a corner to say he's not us. Yeshua is better than all of them. Yeshua said in verse 34, well, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. Yep, that's what happens here in 1st century Judea. You're right. But those who are considered worthy, love that, to attain to that age and the resurrection from the dead, it's not like that, boys. They don't marry and they're not given in marriage. It's not the same planet. The world to come is different than the world that is. They cannot even die anymore because they're like angels. He doesn't say they are angels. He says they're like angels. And are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection, the anastasis. I mean, he says it twice that there is a resurrection from the dead. He is as foundational of a biblicist as you can get. He's saying, you guys try it. You don't want me to say? You want me to say I'm a resurrectionist? Okay, I'm a resurrectionist. There's a time to be blurting the very thing they're trying to trap you to say, and a time not to. And he's declaring himself a believer in the God of the resurrection, and that there will be Techiyat HaMetim, the resurrection of the dead. He believes that the dead will come to chai, to life. You believe that? If there is no resurrection, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, then Yeshua didn't rise from the dead. And if he didn't rise from the dead, then you're still what?
Sin.
In your sins. And that's not a good story. Therefore, since you aren't in your sins, therefore he had to rise from the dead. I love Paul. So clever. But here's Yeshua who gave Paul the cleverness. Verse 37, that the dead are raised. Let me answer that question clearly. Even Moses showed. Why does he cite Moses? They only cited Moses. They didn't even believe in the prophets unless it agreed with Moses. They were more like the modern day Karaites than anything else. The Sadducees believed only in Moses. So, you want Moses? I'll give you Moses. And in the passage about the bush, the burning bush, who was in that story? Moses, that's right. Moses and the burning bush. This is in the famous call to go and let my people go, to go to the Exodus, down to Pharaoh and get the Jews out. Where Moses calls the Lord, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now that's a standard triad. What does that prove? Hey Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. If he's the God, well, that's what he says. He's not the God of the dead, but of the living. For all live to him. That's a Lucan add-on. All live to him. I love that. If Abraham died and God is not the God of the dead, he'd say he used to be the God of Abraham. But that he is the God of Abraham says that Abraham still is. If he is the God God of Isaac. It says that Isaac still is. Therefore, Isaac rose from the dead, etc. He's the God of the living. Some of the scribes answered and said, Teacher, you've spoken well. For they didn't have courage to question him any longer. Concession rather than flattery. They're agreeing with him. Some of the scribes, verse 39, answered and said, spot on. Teacher, you nailed me. You got me. I'm now no longer a Sadducee. I'm a scribe for Jesus. That's what they're saying. You've spoken well. They didn't have courage to question him any longer. They're converted. Yeah, they're now Jesus people. So the flattery of the Sadducees doesn't work. It's as clear as the nose on your face, he said. 34 to 39, I'll tell you what heaven's like. These are explanations from the Savior. Heaven is like, not like this. Heaven's going to be different than this. And on the earth, you get married, you have kids, you have grandsons, you play with them, and it's normal life, which he doesn't deride at all, but he says that's not heaven. You think that's heaven, you should see the real heaven. Heaven is beyond anything. And let me tell you, dear friends, heaven is not me on a cloud playing a harp. One, I don't play harp. Two, it's fairly lonely to be a harp player on a cloud, isn't it? I mean, what kind of socialization is that? Maybe I'd get together with the orchestra once every month or something in the cloud gatherings, but it's got to be better than that. I'm not sure what it'll be, but it ain't that. Verse 41, he said to them, now he's introducing a new subject. And this often happens in the ministry of Yeshua. He'll hear something, he'll answer it, and then he'll add to it the next mix. He said to them, how is it that they say the Messiah is David's son, the son of David? How is it that they say the Messiah is the son of David? Who says that? Who says that the Messiah is the son of David? Jewish sources. Everybody. Ben David, Mashiach ben David is the standard of the title of the Messiah in modern, even Orthodox Jewish world. Mashiach ben Yosef, the son of Joseph, the suffering. Mashiach ben David, the royal one. He's going to be from the line of King David. He's going to be the son of David. There was hope for that when Solomon was ascending to the throne. He would be like David, his father. And there are plenty of Bible verses through the Psalms and other parts towards the end where even Amos 9, where he'll raise up the tabernacle of David. David's this hero who's going to come back either himself, so then they said, well, the son of David will do it, meaning a person in the lineage of David. That makes sense. How is it that they say the Messiah is the son of David? Because David, Yeshua answers, says in the book of Psalms, 110, the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool of your feet. Therefore David calls him Lord. How is he then his son? That's pretty powerful. There is no answer to that, except to say, yes, sir, you are right. Well spoken. Some of the scribes might have joined in again. It says, I'm on Yeshua's team. Wow. He's the son of David who is the Lord of David. And he does that when he deals with this Psalm 110, which features a character who's only listed a couple times, once in Genesis 14 and once in Psalm 110, Melchizedek, one of the most unusual characters. Whole chapter 7 of Hebrews features him to explain how Yeshua is a priest, even though he's from the Davidic line. If he's from the David line, then he is unable to be a priest. What line is David from?
Judah.
From the tribe of Judah. No priest was from Judah. Priests were from what tribe? From Levi, that's right, the Levitical people. So Yeshua is basically setting the plan that the writer of Hebrews gets in chapter 7 to say, I'm David's son, but I'm a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. And he cites Psalm 110 to initiate that. I think it's pretty clever. Verse 45, while all the people were listening, don't you love that? He said to the disciples, beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes, love respectful greetings in the marketplaces, and flattery. Chief seats in the shoal and places of honor at banquets, who devour widows' houses, and for appearance's sake offer long prayers. These will receive the greater prima, this condemnation. So the warning is clear in 45 and 46. He's explained that this Messiah who would come, the son of David, is greater than David, greater than royal lineage. He's explained what heaven's like. He said it's as clear as the nose on your face, right there in front of you. But be careful. Don't join with anybody and everybody just because they're Jewish or they're leaders. Beware of the scribes, who are the prominent, who walk around in these fancy, etc., who look so Jewish. That doesn't mean they represent. Those who represent 1% are not devouring widows' houses. That's a financial recommendation, reference. Don't be impressed with long prayers and people who do religion in public. It's not impressive. Not to God. It might impress you, but that's not impressive, God. Beware of these folks. Yeshua is saying the Maginot line is set. You're on one team or the other. You don't cross over and join that team if you're already on my team. Yeshua is calling people to a decision to follow him. And if you're listening online and you've been listening to these now 20 chapters of the book of Luke, maybe you need to make a decision too and profess faith in Jesus and come and join us and celebrate with us. That's Luke chapter 20.
Before creation, before the world began, from earth's foundation, Yeshua the Lamb